Good day. I'm Joseph Noah. I'm a medical doctor and a biochemist, and I'm the author of Document X, Direct Evidence of God's Existence. Now, there's another misconception about evolution, and that is the idea of, or the misconception that evolution took place in a linear fashion, that lower animals somehow directly evolved into higher animals, that apes somehow miraculously transform into humans. This is not true. If you look at humans and apes, for example, going back hundreds of thousands of years, the ancestors of humans and chimps become progressively similar in structure and form until about 7 million years ago, when the members of these groups are indistinguishable. They emerge into a single ancestral species, a common ancestor of man and chimps. Now, proceeding in the opposite direction, going forward into time, geographical factors such as intervening landscape split this ancestral species into two groups. The one would eventually give rise to the modern chimps and the others to humans. Now, we still don't know the nature of the animal that gave rise to chimps and humans. You can appreciate the impossibility of finding a single fossil that represents this ancestral species amongst thousands of fossils. But fortunately, there are fossils which demonstrate common ancestry, specimens that reveal a combination of ape and human-like features. We have the same situation with lions and tigers. Today they are a separate species, but if you trace their ancestry, they converge into a common ancestor. Now, the same consideration applies to all other species. So in other words, evolution followed a kind of a branch pattern. So scientists, using the available data such as anatomical evidence, fossil studies, embryonic similarities, have constructed a diagrammatic tree which depicts the rise and development of life. What is remarkable is that scientists independently across the world have come up with the same pattern, the same kind of tree, which shows us that this tree is not some kind of a artificial human construct, but represents something fundamental in nature. So if you look at this tree, each of these branches represent a particular species. And when a branch divides, it indicates speciation. In other words, a single ancestral species splitting into two or more daughter species. And each of these daughter species, again, can give rise to other species as the tree of life ramifies. If you observe the tree of life, the bottom of the tree, the trunk of the tree, indicates when life began 3.5 billion years ago. Moving upwards towards the uppermost branches represents the current state. Now, the main trunk of the tree may be said to represent the first living cells, probably prokaryotic cells. And the soil of the tree are the chemicals from which the cells evolved. Now, the first major trunks of the tree may be said to represent the precursors of all life forms, of microscopic life forms, animal life forms, and plant life. And each of those branches will divide again into sub-branches, and again divide into sub-sub-branches, and so on. So what this tree tells us, that we are all related via the innumerable branches of this tree, through descent from a great common ancestor represented by the trunk of the tree, which I said earlier are the first forms of life, the prokaryotic cells. Now, what is amazing about this tree is that it does not tell us only that all life forms are related, but also specifies the degree of relatedness. What I mean by that is, why are humans, for example, closer to chimps compared to cats, for example? Or why are mice and rats closer to each other compared to snails? Now, it's an entirely reasonable assumption that the closer the genetic similarity between two species, the closer the cousinship and the more recent the common ancestor. For example, chimps and humans share a 98% DNA similarity, because chimps and humans emerged from a common ancestor about 7 million years ago. So there has not been much time for mutational buildup and genetic changes to produce a vastly different species, and hence a 98% DNA similarity. If you look at the mouse line, for example, we share only 90% of our DNA with mice. Now, the mouse lineage diverged from the ape-human lineage about 100 million years ago. So there's been enough time for the mouse ancestors to develop differences, and hence that 10% discrepancy. A general rule, therefore, is that the greater the similarity in the DNA sequence between two species, the closer the cousinship and the more recent the common ancestor. The greater the dissimilarity in DNA sequence between species, the more distant the relationship and the more remote the ancestor. So it all fits. Finally, how do we know that chimps and humans share a common ancestor that existed 7 million years ago? How do scientists know that the gorilla ancestors separated from the ape-human line 9 million years ago and the orangutan 12 million years ago? What enables scientists to put a date on these branching events? And the answer lies in the DNA molecule. DNA acts as a kind of a biological clock. It undergoes changes at a fixed, constant rate. Going back into time when chimps and humans were a single ancestral species, their DNA would have been identical or nearly identical. I mean, we are a single biological species, we as humans, and our DNA is very similar. When this ancestral group, the common ancestor of chimps and humans, split into two groups due to geographic isolation, an intervening forest, for example, they evolve independently in different directions. Each lineage built up mutations, and these mutations accumulated over geological time, so that their DNA in these lineages became progressively dissimilar. And so did their features, until finally two distinct species were recognizable, chimps and humans. Now, if we focus on a particular gene in humans, for example, and we compare this gene to the chimp version, the number of differences between these two equivalent genes is an indication when the DNA of these two lineages would have been identical, and that would have been in the beginning when they were one ancestral species. If we use the same method and apply to gorillas, for example, the number of differences between the same gene in humans and the gorilla version would be greater, and this would be expected because the gorilla ancestors parted company with the chimp-human line at a much earlier phase. And in the case of orangutans, the difference is even more marked. And this again is expected because the split of the orangutan ancestors from the human ape line is even more ancient. All the facts fit. It makes perfect sense.